Here they are. This is the one. Hello in there. I think they're asleep. Hello?
What? Who's that? Oh, it's you.
What's all that banging?
It's those children back.
What, Philip and Helen?
Seems like it.
Well, how can we help this week?
Greek farming and trade.
Well, that means another trip to Greece. Time to call up Athena again. The first thing to know about farming in Greece is that it's not easy. 3/4 of the country is mountainous, and that means that it's no good for growing things. Another problem is that it's very hot in spring and summer and very dry, so you have to have crops that will do well in dry weather. That's where olive trees come in handy. The gift of the goddess Athena, and a very good gift too. Olive trees produce lots of little black fruit which are harvested in the autumn. Harvesting them is fun. Well, it was in my day. Some of us would climb up into the trees to give the branches a shake. Others would beat at the branches with sticks. And some of us would collect the olives up in baskets. Greeks love eating olives. Always have, always will.
Delicious.
But that's not all. If you squeeze olives in a press, you get an oil, and that's very useful too. You can have it as a dressing on your food. And you can also use it to cook with. And then, of course, there's another very important use for it.
What's that?
Don't tell them everything.
Huh? Oh, yes. Well, work that one up for yourself. Apart from olives, they would grow corn. Corn to turn into bread. And vines. Vines to produce grapes and wine. And they also grew lots of vegetables, of course. They would keep some for themselves and sell the rest in the market, just as they do today. Of course, there was no paper money in our time. Metal coins. That's what we used. And that's another Greek invention, coinage. Every city had its own coins. As Athens was the city of the goddess Athena, we used to put her symbol on the coins, the owl of wisdom. And up at the top you can see the olive, her gift to the city. Not all of the farmers' produce would be sold in the local town. Sometimes it would be packed up in storage jars and taken abroad to be traded for other goods. Travelling on land through the mountainous countryside was very difficult. But fortunately, Greece is surrounded by sea, and the Greeks have always been good sailors. The sea was like your motorway. It made travelling easy.
Is this one of those storage jars? Wow, it's huge.
Well, if you're going to store grain and keep the rats out, you need something big and strong.
Big enough for a man to hide in.
Hey, who'd want to hide in a jar?
You mean you don't know?
Well, you soon will, because it's time for the next part of the story.
You must sacrifice yourself, Herakles. You must serve King Eurystheus for 12 long years. Because you slew your family, you must do whatever labor he asks of you.
So Herakles entered the service of his cringing cousin Eurystheus. First, he killed the lion of Nemea, and the lion's strength became his strength. Then he pinioned the leaping deer of Cerenea, and with the help of his nephew, he clubbed and hacked Hydra, the water monster, to death. So Herakles had achieved 3 dangerous labors. But his heart still ached because of his terrible crime. And worse trials awaited him. Your 4th labor, Herakles, and most likely your last, is to capture the wild boar of Mount Erymanthus. Bring him here, alive. Mount Erymanthus was stony, steep, covered with gorse thickets and stands of cypress, and the boar who lived there was as wild as the place. His tusks were sharp as crescent moons, large as those of an elephant. His skin was thick as leather toe caps. For week after week, the boar led Herakles a terrible dance. Thorns, needles, and stones scratched and tore at him, scrawling their scarlet signatures all over the hero's skin. But then, winter overtook autumn. It began to snow. The bottomless sky revolved with dizzy dancers. Snow fell on snow. The wind shifted and drifted it, and that was the help that Herakles needed. One morning, Herakles chased the wild boar along the course of a stream and drove him into a snowdrift. The old boar was trapped, and Herakles leapt onto its back. He noosed its horrible snout, and then the hero slung the boar around his shoulders and set out at once for Tiryns. When brave Eurystheus heard that Herakles was approaching the city, bringing the boar with him, he knew just what to do. He jumped into an empty wine jar and hid. Take it away, Herakles! Take the boar away! Take it away! Herakles' next labor was to get rid of the man-eating birds. These ghastly creatures lived on the Stymphalian marsh. They had sharp, pointed beaks and claws made of bronze. The shafts of their feathers were made of bronze, too, and they fired them at their victims to pierce their hearts or stab their eyes. Once again, the goddess Athena came to his aid.
Take this iron rattle. It will make such a clatter that the birds will be scared by it. And then, Herakles, more than human, only human, then you must trust in your own strength.
So Herakles went down to the marsh and shook the rattle. The birds were terrified. They rose from their coverts in one massive, squawking, rackety cloud. They fired their bronze feathers at Herakles, but he was safe, protected by his trusty lion skin. And then Herakles fired his own arrows back at them. deadly arrows that he had dipped in the poison of the Hydra. Within a minute, 100 brace of birds had splashed down into the marsh, stone dead. All the others flew away, hundreds, thousands, and they were never seen again. King Augeas was rich, stinking rich. That's what some people said. He owned more cattle than anyone else in Greece. But the king's cattle yards and stables hadn't been mucked out for years. They were sloppy and sticky and stinky. The filthy wallow sucked and popped as it began to dry out, and it came up to a child's armpits. That's your 6th labor, Herakles. Clean out Augeas' stables and do the job in 1 day. Never. That's a labor for servants, for slaves. You've no choice, Herakles. Whatever Eurystheus chooses, Herakles must do. When Herakles arrived at the Augean stables, he despaired of cleaning them in 1 day. The whole place was deep in filth, unimaginable quantities. How on earth was he to clear it all up in a day? But then he heard a voice in his ear.
Water, Herakles. Use the water.
And when Herakles looked around him, he saw what to do, and how he could make a good profit at the same time. He made a bargain with King Augeas that if he could clean out the stables in a day, Augeas would give him 1 in 10 of all his cattle. And Augeas gladly accepted the wager. He was certain Herakles would fail and was glad to get a free day's work out of him. So Herakles set to work. First, he smashed down a section of the stable walls with his club. Then he seized a spade and dug a trench from a river across to the broken wall. And at once the miracles started to happen. Swift, clear, cool water sluiced through the stables and cattle yards and sheepfolds. It washed them as clean as a cat's tongue. Herakles gave a roar of triumph. Another labor had been accomplished. But there were many days of suffering still ahead of him.